Hello, my name is Ailsa Guardiola Gonzalez. I serve as pastor at First Christian Church in Tucson, Arizona.
My name is Pedro Ramos Goicolea. I am a pastor of Comunidad Limen Christian Church, also in Tucson, Arizona.
We're glad you have joined us today as we share our story with you. We are here today to share the exciting news of ministry from the borderlands in Arizona. Ministry that is transformational, ministry that is moving toward the liberation for all. And we are so excited to invite you on this journey with us.
Poet Alberto Rios from Nogales says that the borderlands is a place where plans are broken and repaired and broken again. And it is in this liminal space that we can dream and do ministry that is limitless in possibilities. Because when we start something, we're going to start over, and we're going to do that again and again. And no one is seeking perfection. It is in those broken plans that need to be repaired and redo again and again that we maybe get closer to what is it, Ailsa?
The reign of God.
There you go. Amen to that.
We seek to be closer to the reign of God.
We work within the hope of a new paradigm in which those whose stories of migration and border crossings lead the way of our transformation. We see this in both education and service, responding to the realities of oppression at the border. So let me provide context for Comunidad Limen's ministry. We're still a relative new church ministry. We are on our third year. We started on January of 2020, right in the midst, or just a little bit before we isolated ourselves during the pandemic. When we decided to come together and call ourselves church, we did so with a new paradigm in mind. And the pandemic just added to this new paradigm that we were encountering for ministry. A new reality that we were seeing slowly but steadily unfolding in front of us. So we started Comunidad Limen considering that many in the Latinx community have undergone a transformative shift culturally and religiously. And we're embracing a progressive and deconstructed approach to spirituality, one that takes into account the reality of our youth, virtual reality, as well as real life. Our youth are across the spectrum of gender identities, and they're no longer afraid of being who they are. We put a strong emphasis on inclusivity, on welcoming and affirming each other as we are. Social justice and activism are integral parts of the community's spiritual life. And we are fostering a kind of faith that works. It can be an instrument, a catalyst for positive change. It's a means to engage and to advocate for a more equitable world, something that feels tangible for our members, for our folks. Our Hispanic parents became spiritual refugees because they refused to decide between love of God and love of family. Rather, when their kids came out, they chose both. An all-encompassing manifestation of love, where neither of them had to resign to their faith, their love for church, the love for God, and their need to gather and worship this God that has shown so incredible and bold love. And as a Latinx community, we recognize the intersectionality of identities and experiences because we come from very diverse backgrounds. So we work to create a space that honors and uplifts each other experiences, recognizing that we're all diverse and yet we work together in this common struggle of being migrants, our stories of migration and being people of color in America. For my church community, we are constantly encountering borders, whether they are religious borders, physical borders, as well as social borders. Thus, the name Limen, Comunidad Limen. Our mission is simple and yet profound: to create a space of connection with Jesus, with our neighbors, and with ourselves. And we recognize the importance of liminal spaces in our lives, those threshold moments of transformation. Although at the borderlands, liminality, it seems like a permanent moment that lasts a lifetime. Limen derived from the Latin word liminal, meaning threshold, and reflects the essence of our spiritual journey. It is a word that carries subtle nuances of frontera, the closest synonym to liminal in Spanish, reminding us of the borderlands where we are, where we, as the book of Acts says, where we have our being. As Richard Rohr wisely said, all transformation occurs in liminal spaces. So here at Limen, we embrace the in-betweenness. And here is where ministry unfolds for us. We believe that in these sacred spaces, God's transformative power resides. So the biggest and boldest decision for our faith community was sharing this journey with others, to not just do ministry that emerges from our community, but invite the church, wherever it is, whatever you are, to come and hear the story that we have to share. The story of the progressive Latinx community, the story of the land where we are, the story of struggle, of survival, and yet of vitality and flourishing communities that the borderlands hold. It is with these same lenses that we use to build our faith community. We are using them to share our stories with the larger church. In partnership with our brothers and sisters from First Christian Church, we created a border immersion program called Caminantes. First Christian Church, when they heard our stories, they opened a safe space for us. They stood in solidarity with our journeys and allowed us to dream about the limitless possibilities for ministry in liminal space, and to do so together as sojourners, as companions on this road, on this path, on this call that we received as disciples of Christ, to be truly a movement for wholeness, because we're in a place where fragmentation, where it's so evident how fragmented our communities are, and yet threads that hold our communities together, those are still there, and they're as strong as they have ever been. So Ailsa will share a little bit more about her journey and her experiences with First Christian Church.
So First Christian was able to respond to Comunidad Liman's invitation thanks to its history, or in part thanks to its history of ministries for social justice on the border, from ministries with migrant workers in the 50s who were working on farmland, to the development of free health clinics for those who had crossed borders, to being a sanctuary church, and then to being a congregation that started a ministry of putting water in the desert, to finally, in the last 10 years or so, offering short-term housing for those who are seeking asylum. Now, First Christian finds itself in a new chapter with a new partner, calling the congregation to a new way, still responding to needs in the midst of the ever-changing realities of the border, but now with a greater awareness of the necessity of being led by those with the experience of migration when responding to needs. The latest shifts that have occurred since the pandemic are that we now receive still individuals and families that are seeking asylum, but instead of on a short-term basis and getting them on to their sponsors, now responding to those who we see in the greatest need among this population, which are those whose sponsors have essentially deserted them. People who had committed to receive them, to provide housing and food until they could get a foothold as their cases move forward in immigration court. When their sponsors, for whatever reason, say, no, we can't take you, maybe they've faced a crisis for themselves or just completely ghost them. We are now receiving those individuals and those families for longer term to help them get a foothold in the community, finding a place to live and work, and connecting to community services to help them in their process of seeking asylum. We come to this work through personal and vocational identities that manifest both the ambiguities and the hopeful possibilities of liminal and borderland spaces. As for me, I see myself, as I really believe we all are, a child of colonization. Though born and raised in the southeastern US, I am the daughter of Puerto Rican parents. Puerto Rico. Yes, that island with an over 500-year and counting history of colonization. A place where grandfathers on both sides of my family encountered disciples missionaries and converted to this tradition and way of practicing the Christian faith. One receiving education from those ministries and becoming a disciples pastor himself. When my parents came to the mainland, they came having been nurtured and rooted within the disciples' tradition. And so they sought a disciples' congregation in which to worship. The only option at the time, though, where they were living was a white congregation, English-speaking congregation. Thus, this congregation became the spiritual home for me and my siblings. And as was true in every space outside of our family home, we experienced the tug of war, if you will, between the expectations of assimilation and that fierce grip to hold onto language, food, cultural pride, and identity that our parents bestowed on us. This experience of liminality is definitive for me. A constant question when living in the racially divided Black-white world of my upbringing and even where I am now. How much of me is okay in this space? Is this part of me safe here, if not over there? What parts of how I see the world, understand it because of who I am, do I share or must I tuck away in this moment? What do I need to do, say, or be to pass? That is, what do I need to do, say, or be for my validity as a human, a person, to not be questioned because of who I am perceived to be ethnically or culturally? The legacy of colonization, you see, is not limited to a geographical location or by a physical boundary marked by lines on a map. It is part of every political and social structure, and it lives in all of us. My growing awareness of this drew my attention to the experience of others, though with very different stories and experiences and backgrounds than mine. It led to work as a mission coworker in my 20s in Central America, and eventually to Tucson to serve as pastor at First Christian Church. The congregation at First Christian Church has a history of responding to people's struggle for justice in the borderlands, and yet it still exists within the legacy of colonization specific to this geographical context and within our own denomination.
16 years ago, I embarked on a life-changing journey, leaving my homeland in Mexico to start a Hispanic church in Arizona. The Disciples of Christ had a grand vision of creating 1,000 churches, 1,000 ways. And my church was destined to be one of them. Fueled by youth and naivete, I found myself following a simple logic: to immerse myself in the community and evangelize people, bring them to church. Little did I know that this path would lead me to relive the same patterns of conversion that once brought me to Christianity. To truly understand my calling, I had to look back to Mexico's rich history, spanning 400 years before the arrival of the first Protestant missionaries from the United States. The vibrant tapestry of religious syncretism, the indigenous struggle for survival, the mestizaje, the profound cultural heritage shaped by Hispanic colonialism had all contributed to my Catholic upbringing. However, as I entered my teenage years, a transformative experience changed my life forever. I embraced the path of a Pentecostal Christian, which later evolved into evangelical Christianity. Little did I know that this spiritual journey would leave me famished, feeling the void of a faith influenced by American missionaries that seemed to clash with my culture, my land's history, and my cherished traditions. Paradoxically, despite founding a Disciples of Christ church, I found myself repeating the same patterns that once converted me. My transformative moment came during a worship service that would redefine the purpose of our church forever. As I stood delivering my sermon, hope and excitement filled me when the spouse of one of our church members appeared at the back of the sanctuary. This man who we had eagerly awaited to join our congregation, he was finally there. But he had an extraordinary thing to share with us. He had encountered a desperate migrant as he was driving his car out in the unforgiving heat of the desert. This migrant was exhausted and on the brink of death. Without hesitation, he put him in his car, bringing him to our church for refuge and aid. As we gathered around the migrant, his name was Israel, and I couldn't help but be struck by the irony of his name, a wandering man in the desert. Watching Israel slowly break a salt cracker into tiny pieces to savor its sustenance, it reminded me of my own hunger for belonging and spiritual nourishment years ago when I found my way to the doors of a Disciples of Christ church, a church that welcomed me with open arms. I too had feasted on the bread of life and drank from the cup of forgiveness. This encounter with Israel was a turning point. There was no going back for us. It stirred something deep within me, prompting me to question the teachings and theology inherited by American missionaries that had been harshly discordant with our cultural heritage, my community's cultural heritage. We as Comunidad Liman grapple with a critical question. What was Jesus truly saying to us at this moment, with this encounter? How could we embrace Jesus' liberating love in a way that affirm the lives of our youth, that affirm our traditions, our heritage, that was coherent with the need for social justice in our community, for our community, for migrants like Israel that were knocking at our doors, seeking refuge. It hasn't been an easy journey, but it demanded the dismantling and deconstruction of layers of preconceived notions about church and faith and culture. But in our pursuit of truth, we found a profound purpose to unravel the essence of Jesus' message, to discover a love that transcended boundaries and upheld the dignity of every human soul. Our lives and the lives of future generations depend on this transformation. So our church, once guided by a simple mission of evangelizing and making our worship service grow, we bore a profound responsibility to be a sanctuary for those in need, to embrace diversity and the uniqueness of our community, of our members, and to embrace Jesus' love in its truest form. And from that day forward, our ministry took on a new meaning, forever shaped by the memory of a migrant named Israel, whose presence at our church's door ignited a fire of compassion, a call to gain profound understanding that would change us all, that would transform us all.
As we work together, we seek to live into the mystery of the gospel. We find ourselves in awe of the movement of the Spirit. Opening doors to a new church, an open and affirming Latinx community, has led to more than just sharing space. We are discovering new ways to worship together, to fellowship, to share meals, and to serve our community together. A together that hopefully will look different than the way we have always done it at First Christian. You know what I mean. That expectation that those who join us will obviously come and join us doing it the way we have done it, the way that we have lived and shared our faith. No, we hope for a truly new way that expresses the whole mosaic of the body of Christ. We believe this work is essential and must become the foundation for ministry within all of the Christian church disciples of Christ. Specifically, that we must be shaped and formed by the stories of those who have been relegated as a footnote at best or as inconsequential. These stories are indispensable to the vitality of our movement, which strives to be for wholeness in this fragmented world.